Are you someone who is ambitious, quick thinking, and doesn't let emotions get in the way of what you want to achieve? If so, you'll be able to relate to the King of Swords. Stay tuned and learn how to interpret this card when it shows up in a reading. Hi everybody, I'm Sue Ellen Clayton. Welcome to my channel where we are learning the tarot deck one card at a time. Today's card is the King of Swords. Most people find the court cards to be the most challenging part of the tarot deck, and I will do my best to demystify it here. I will be using the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. You'll find a link to the deck below, as well as to the many books that I used in my research. So let's get started. In simplistic terms, the king is the father figure of the royal court. He's married to the queen and they have 2 children. The page represents their youngest child, and the knight is their frat boy's son who is off at college, finding his way in the world and trying not to get into too much trouble. In the Middle Ages in Europe, kings came to power through conquest, election, inheritance, or some other type of agreement. They ruled people and territories within defined borders. The king was the official leader. He had the ultimate authority and the final word. He had great power due to his position, and everybody knew it. Kings generally grew up knowing that this was their future, and so did the people in their kingdom, so they were very much groomed for the position. In tarot, the kings are considered to be wise, mature, stable, and have lots of masculine energy. I think the best example of a king is King Charles III in England. As a prince, Charles grew up knowing that he would be king once his mother passed away. She passed away in 2022 at the age of 96, and he'd waited his entire 73 years to be king. Next in line to the throne is his son Prince William, followed by William's oldest child, Prince George. I found an interesting article in Harper's Bazaar from 2017 titled, "How Prince William is Training to Become King." You can find a link in the description box, and it is a great example of how kings are prepared to rule. At the time of the article, William was 35 years old, and the article describes how he started training at a young age under the guidance of his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth. As a teenager, Queen Elizabeth would host William at Windsor Castle, where they would open the state boxes and she would guide him through the papers. This taught him about the Constitution. In 2009, when William was 27, he underwent an intensive 2-year training program to help him learn about the country. This included working with different departments in the British governments, private lessons from constitutional experts, and briefings with high-profile people such as the Prime Minister. As he's gotten older, Prince William has done a lot of charity work. In 2017, he spearheaded a mental health campaign called Heads Together, which put together a coalition of 8 mental health charity partners to change the conversation on mental health. Their goals included tackling stigma, raising awareness, and providing help for people with mental health problems. Another one of his projects, which started in June 2023, is called Homewards, which is a 5-year, locally led program that hopes to end homelessness. I hope this helps you to understand the kings. They are educated, mature, and prepared from close to birth to lead and to rule. One of the reasons that the court cards are challenging is that they can represent 3 things. The first is a person. Kings were considered to be mature men over the age of 40. Depending on your age, a king could represent your father, grandfather, adult son, romantic partner, boss, or any other mature man in your life. The second thing a king can represent is a part of yourself that has a masculine, take-charge energy. You're the first to volunteer and have no issue taking responsibility or telling people what to do. And the third thing a court card can represent is a situation that requires you to be a leader. For instance, you can't figure out why you're struggling to get things done at work, and a king card can indicate that it's time for you to stop hiding in your cubicle and take on a leadership role. So how do you know whether this king represents a real person, a part of yourself, or a situation that requires a new approach? First of all, go by the question. If it isn't clear, look at the surrounding cards and its position in a spread. Here's 2 other things to keep in mind when we discuss the court cards. First of all, don't give much credence to ages, gender, or physical characteristics. For instance, a king is traditionally considered to be a man over the age of 40. Does that mean that he doesn't represent your wife because she's 30 years old and female? No, it does not. Secondly, and more important, look at the energy from this card. Your level of maturity is not based on your age, and it can vary greatly in different areas of your life. We all know super mature people in their teens and very immature people in their 80s. You can also be mature in one area of your life, such as relationships, and totally reckless in another area, such as your finances. One of the easiest ways to understand the personality of each king is to understand the chart on the screen. Each member of the court card's personality is related to 2 elements. Here's a quick reminder of what each element means. Pentacles are connected to the element of earth. It's all about things in the material world, such as our bodies, homes, nature, or how we earn our living. These people are very stable. They work hard and enjoy traditions. Wands is connected to the element of fire. These people tend to be feisty, confident, enthusiastic, adventurous, extroverted, passionate, flashy, and high energy. These people make good athletes and good salespeople. Cups are connected to the element of water. This card is all about emotions. Cups people are gentle, loving, sensitive, nurturing, and feel things deeply. These people make good healers and social workers. Swords is connected to the element of air. Swords is all about communicating and expressing ourselves. This includes our thoughts about ourselves as well as our thoughts about the world around us. This encompasses intelligence, knowledge, truth, mental clarity, and our sense of right and wrong. These people make good lawyers and writers. Each of the court cards is made up of 2 elements. The first element is related to their rank. On the column down the left, you can see that all pages are related to earth. All knights are related to fire, all queens are related to water, and all kings are related to air. Each member of the court card also has a suit, and along the top of the chart you can see the 4 suits. Pentacles are related to earth, wands are related to fire, cups are related to water, and swords are related to air. As you can see on the chart, the King of Swords is a double combination of the element of air. The rank of all the kings connects to air, which makes sense because kings are considered to be the wise, logical, intellectual communicators of the tarot court. The King of Swords is also connected to the suit of swords, which is the element of air. So we have a fast-thinking, logical king with nothing to slow him down. In the King of Swords, we see a king who is wearing a gold crown. On the front of the crown is a cherub. Under his crown is a red cowl. He's wearing a blue and white tunic with red sleeves. Over it is a purple cape with red lining. He's also wearing red shoes. He is sitting on a gray throne with a backrest that extends over the top of the card. There are 3 butterflies on the top of the backrest. The butterfly on the top portion is surrounded by 2 sickle moons. Beneath the butterflies are 3 sylphids or air fairies. His left hand is in a gentle fist and he is holding a double-edged sword in his right hand. The sky is blue with gray clouds. We see 2 birds flying on the right side of the card. The ground contains many colors. Behind the king we see a small lake, blue mountains, and trees. When the King of Swords appears in a reading, it can refer to you or someone you know who is an ambitious, quick-thinking, goal-oriented leader who doesn't let emotions get in the way of what he wants to achieve. It can represent someone who loves mental challenges. He can absorb and analyze information quickly and discern what is most important without getting sidetracked by unimportant details. The King of Swords can be a message that it's time for you to stand up for your beliefs. Let's talk about the symbolism in the King of Swords. He is wearing a gold crown. It has a cherub on the front of it, which is very similar to the cherub on the Queen of Swords throne. Cherubs are basically angels on earth and are a symbol of protection. Under his crown is a red cowl that, I assume, is also a cap of maintenance, like that is worn by all the other kings. Its purpose was to keep his crown secure and comfortable on his head, or to maintain the cap in place, thus the name cap of maintenance. This cap was granted to people as a symbol of honor or special privilege, and they were worn by kings of the United Kingdom before their coronation. Pam Richards, in her book Understanding Tarot, says that its purpose was to channel some of his logic into something that is understandable by others, and to buffer him from being totally controlled by logic, so that he can think about his ideas rather than being totally controlled by them. He is wearing a blue and white tunic that is the same color as the High Priestess. The High Priestess is all about strength, knowledge, and wisdom. Like the King of Swords, she values the truth. She is also connected to spirit and keeps a lot hidden. His tunic has red sleeves. He is wearing a purple cape with red lining. Purple is a very spiritual color that can indicate his high morals and link to spirit. We see red from his cowl, through his sleeves, under his cloak, and down to his shoes. Red demonstrates passion, and his passion clearly goes from the top of his head to the tip of his toes. His left hand is in a gentle fist, and he is holding a double-edged sword in his right hand. He stands ready to protect. The sword indicates that he is ready to make judgments and will cut through everything necessary to get to the truth. The back of his throne extends above the top of the card. This represents his connection with spirit. At the top portion of the throne, we see a butterfly surrounded by 2 sickle moons. Below them are 2 more butterflies. We also see both butterflies and the sickle moons on the Queen of Swords throne. You might recall that the sickle moons represent the first or last phase of a moon cycle, and you can see an image on the screen. They represent rites of passage and the changing season. They also look like a scythe, such as the one carried by the Grim Reaper, and they are used to cut away parts of life that are dead or no longer wanted. Butterflies represent transformation and moving to a new stage of life. Here's what Pam Richards has to say, quote, "With the butterfly between the changing, rebirthing nature of the moons and the destructive nature of the sickles, he has rebuilt himself in the past and transformed himself due to loss, battles, and his own private wars," unquote. There are 3 butterflies. It's interesting to look back at the 3 of Swords, which is probably one of the most dismal cards in the deck, and see that the king has rebuilt his life after some very tough times. The figures we see on the throne are called air elementals, also known as air fairies or sylphids. One is above his right shoulder and the other 2 are behind his sword. According to Pam Richards, quote, "Elementals can be good or bad as they are neither positive nor negative. They fly on the air currents, delivering their gifts of intellect, communication, and logic like voices in the wind. Here there is no wind needed to deliver their messages, as they are set in stone as an aspect of the king's rule. The 2 on his left shoulder, on the right side of the throne, are talking to the king. One reaches its arm out to his ear. So even on the emotional right of the card, there is a breeze of reasoning blowing. The one on his right shoulder is barely discernible. With his eyes facing the sword, he will be focused on its actions. 3 brings growth, so this king is not all about rigid facts and figures, but someone who uses his cutting intellect to create from," unquote. The sky is blue with gray clouds. Blue skies are about clarity, and gray clouds can represent mysteries and things that are hidden. Below the clouds, we see a mountain range which can represent obstacles. However, the king is sitting high above these obstacles. The clouds are low in the sky is mostly clear, and the mountains are very tiny. He has a bird's eye view that gives him a lot of perspective. So I would say that he has faced what he needs to, and his troubles are behind him. We can see a tiny lake, on the right side of the card. I think this shows that while the king has emotions, they do not play a big part in his life. As in the other court cards, we can see cypress trees. It is interesting to see the progression, and I've put an image on the screen. In the page, they are definitely being blown by the wind. By the time we reach the king, the trees are not blowing at all. You may recall from previous court cards that Greeks and Romans consider cypress trees to be a tree of mourning. They would be planted by a grave or in front of a house to warn outsiders that they were entering a place that had been corrupted by a dead body. Bodies were also placed on cypress branches before they were buried. So here we see that the mourning trees are no longer being impacted by the wind, which tells me that the king is healing. I believe that the same thing is true with the clouds. Blue skies symbolize clarity, positivity, and nothing being hidden. Clouds contain water, which represents emotion, and in tarot represent the unconscious or things that are hidden. So we're moving from emotion-filled storm clouds to a place where it looks like the king is able to deal with his feelings. There are two birds in the right-hand corner. He is sitting with his head in the clouds, and the birds can indicate that he has a bird's eye view of what is happening. In tarot, twos generally represent choices or decisions, so they may reflect the double-edged sword and the fact that the king is constantly having to decide the right option. The final thing I wanted to talk about is the ground, which has a lot of colors. If you look at the other swords court cards, the area at the king's feet contains all of the colors from the page, knight, and queen. I think this indicates that he has dominion over all of the land in his kingdom. When the King of Swords appears in an upright position, it can represent someone you know or a part of yourself who is ambitious and determined. This is a person who is smart, quick thinking, and doesn't let emotions get in the way of what he wants to achieve. It can represent someone who is an intellectual and makes decisions based on his mind and not his heart. He is a person who values facts and logic. He can absorb and analyze information quickly and discern what is most important without getting sidetracked by unimportant details. He is someone who values structure, discipline, and chain of command. He follows the rules but is happy to find legitimate loopholes. It can represent someone who loves mental challenges. He is a great communicator and may consider arguing and debating to be a sport. He sticks up for what he believes in. He is a person who is objective, fair, and focused on the truth. He is idealistic and very concerned with facts, fairness, and staying neutral, and looking at all sides of an issue. He will speak the truth but might be blunt. It can represent a person with high moral principles who expects other people to be equally honest. He can be described as authoritative, confrontational, and disciplined. Finally, the King of Swords can represent someone who is an expert in his field. He is extremely focused on his goals but never loses sight of the big picture. He doesn't get sidetracked by petty disagreements or unimportant details. Here's an example of the upright King of Swords, and that is Queen Elizabeth II. Yes, she is a woman, but remember that the court cards are about energy and not gender. As I said earlier in this video, the King of Swords likes structure and is all about staying emotionally detached from a situation and considering the facts. Queen Elizabeth fits this description perfectly. From a young age, she was tidy and showed great self-control. According to an article by Sarah Bradford in The Guardian titled, "You Don't Mess with Gran, The Private Life of Elizabeth II," quote, "She was a tidy, self-contained girl. Her toys carefully arranged in glass-fronted cabinets, toy ponies in a passage outside." Winston Churchill, who first met her when she was 2.5, was impressed by her qualities beyond her tidiness. "She is a character," he told his wife. "She has an air of authority and reflectiveness astonishing to an infant," unquote. The article goes on to say that the Queen was intensely interested in politics and world affairs. Quote, "She liked to know who was up and who was down," wrote James Callaghan, Prime Minister in the late 70s. More seriously, in her long reign, she met U.S. presidents from Harry Truman to Joe Biden, UK Prime Ministers from Churchill to Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, popes from Pius II to Francis, and heads of government, particularly from Commonwealth countries with whom she had private one-to-one meetings, unquote. She was also known for her wit and for her sharp temper, both which she worked hard to keep under control. She had very high standards for herself and her family, and she famously stayed neutral, at least in public. She was also an excellent communicator. I grew up in Canada, and part of our Christmas celebration involved listening to her Christmas Day broadcasts that were largely written by the Queen and delivered by her. She was also totally in control of her emotions. There were only a few occasions during her 70-year reign where she shed a tear in public. They were so rare that they made news. These included in 1966 when she met with survivors of a horrifying avalanche of coal waste that killed 144 people, most of whom were children. Next was in 1997 when the royal yacht Britannia was retired, and she cried at her sister's funeral in 2002. I remember when her husband, Prince Philip, died in 2021. They had been married for 73 years, and she did not shed a tear at his funeral. Here's how an article by Maria Puente in USA Today described it. Quote, "The 94-year-old monarch kept her composure as she exited her Bentley and entered St. George's Chapel at Windsor Castle, a tiny, stooped figure dressed in black and wearing a matching face mask. She sat alone at the service, her head bowed, and left with the Dean of Windsor who officiated," unquote. When the King of Swords appears in a reverse position, it can refer to someone who uses his intellect and communication skills in a way that is heartless and destructive. It can represent someone who is aggressive, intimidating, violent, cruel, and even sadistic. It can symbolize someone who has no conscience and does not tell the truth. He can be an imposter, cheater, hustler, or scam artist. It can represent someone who can lack self-control or be arrogant, domineering, and manipulative. He believes that he is superior and that nobody else's opinion matters. His goal is to win an argument no matter how destructive it is for the other party. It can symbolize someone who does not like structure. He does not believe that rules apply to him. It can symbolize someone who has to control every detail and does not tolerate mistakes. Here's an example of the reversed King of Swords, and it is about a cult leader named John of God. First, let me explain how I found out about him. About 20 years ago, I developed a really weird illness where I ran a low-grade fever for more than 2 years. Except for that, my life was pretty good. But I had young kids, and running a fever 24/7 was not a happy way to live. I just want to backtrack and talk about fevers for a moment. I was always told that a normal temperature was 98.6. I just Googled it and found out that a normal body temperature can range between 97 and 99 degrees Fahrenheit, and a low-grade fever is considered to be over 99.5 degrees, no matter whether your normal body temperature is 97 or 99 degrees. Prior to this fever, I'd spent a few years trying to get pregnant, so I took my temperature a lot to determine whether I was ovulating and knew that a normal body temperature for me was 97.6 degrees. So I had developed this elevated temperature of 99.2, which was 1.6 degrees higher than what was normal for me. I went to many doctors, none of whom considered it to be a true fever or a problem. They'd do a few tests and would eventually conclude that my supposed fever was psychologically based and/or I was doing it for attention, which is how I ended up seeing a therapist who introduced me to John of God. Before I finish the story, I finally found a doctor who diagnosed me with mycoplasma pneumonia, which is hard to diagnose and generally mild, so I was an atypical case. He put me on antibiotics for many months, and I got better. So let's go back to John of God. This therapist was amazing and had been on several pilgrimages to see John of God in the late 1990s and early 2000s. He was in Brazil, and because of her great experiences, she thought he could help me. She described him and her experiences, and I have to admit, I really wanted to go. John of God began doing healings in 1978 in his small town in Brazil. Eventually, his reputation grew, and he had thousands of people from all around the world visiting to seek healing, and he developed a spiritual center. 60 Minutes of Australia estimated that in 2014, his sales earned him more than $10 million per year. He gave people their choice of invisible or visible operations. For invisible operations, you basically sat in a room and meditated. Visible operations were done without anesthetic, and he'd been arrested for practicing medicine without a license. He gained a lot of notoriety in 2010 when a writer named Susan Casey covered her trip to see him in O magazine, and he was subsequently featured on The Oprah Winfrey Show. In 2018, 12 women came forth with allegations of abuse. Within a couple of weeks, the number of accusations reached 600 for rapes that occurred from 1986 to 2017. Some of the women were as young as 14. He was sentenced to 19 years in jail but released to house arrest when the COVID-19 pandemic struck, and he was released due to his age and poor health. Thankfully, I never saw John of God, but I thought of him when I was researching this card, and I think he fits the example of the reversed King of Swords. In 2005, ABC ran a news report about him that featured 5 people who saw John of God and claimed they improved. As a part of the report, a skeptic named James Randi spent an hour in New York City and was interviewed for the show. Randi began his career as a magician and later chose to devote his time to investigating paranormal, occult, and supernatural claims through his foundation. Randi debunked all of the show's claims as basically being parlor tricks. ABC chose not to use any of his comments and cut his critical comments down to under 20 seconds of screen time. I think John of God represents the reversed King of Swords. He had to be an incredible communicator to convince a lot of intelligent people, such as my therapist who had a PhD, that he was a miracle worker and worth multiple trips to Brazil just to meditate in a room. Even if he was legit, someone who was accused of 600 rapes is not just doing this out of the goodness of their heart, so there is clearly a part of him who was manipulative and sadistic. I have enclosed a link to my research in the description if you'd like to learn more. Here are some questions to help you connect with the King of Swords. Number 1, are you able to look at the big picture, or do you get bogged down by details? Number 2, are you too logical and analytical, or could you benefit from relying more on your mind and less on your emotions? Number 3, are you comfortable showing your emotions in public, or are you sometimes too emotional? Number 4, have you ever experienced someone who used their brilliant mind or facility with words to harm you? And finally, number 5, do you feel like structure is important for success? I hope that this video has helped you connect with the King of Swords. If it has, I'd appreciate it if you'd like this video and also subscribe to my channel.